Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So you may have looked through the different gear that we can obtain from this Dragonbone Veil and seen that most of it's pretty useless for an endgame player. And yes, that is in fact how it's meant to be. This gear we can see from in the collections is purely meant to be for those newer players who are newly entering this zone, and this would be the gear they would pick up to improve their item level and thus help them get to endgame. However, we are sorely lacking right now the gear that we would need for endgame players to improve upon what we originally have. So we have in our preview collections, which is supposed to be viewable on the preview server but actually got left out, most likely will be added in on Thursday. And with this gear, we can see we actually have mythic gear here, along with legendary shirt and pants, some legendary rings, and even mythic rings. Now you can kind of just forget about the rarity as it doesn't mean much. Basically, it's just got higher item level, and as you can see there, it's got just similar bonuses as what we've seen before. We could see a headpiece here, and whenever you're damaged for more than 10% of your max HP, you gain that 1.5% awareness and 1% stamina, and this can stack to 5 times. Not so bad for a tank right there. The next piece, we have another headpiece. Whenever you're in combat with one enemy, your power is increased by 7%. I guess this is somewhat usable. People might prefer this over the Gristral Horns, depending on what setup you have and whether you need that crit chance. It can be quite hard sometimes to keep up stacks like the Gristral Horns, which require you to hit every second for that amount. So if you're in a boss fight which phases a lot, you'll end up not having much of your crit. The next piece, we have a armor piece, and we can see this straight up is a replacement for the Ribcage. Yes, indeed, the Ribcage which you will obtain from that massive tier 3 hunt grind in Avernus. Now this Ribcage, as we can see, will basically give you accuracy and combat advantage instead of critical strike and critical severity. Otherwise, it has the exact same setup of whenever you hit for more than 10% of your maximum hit points in a single blow, you will gain one of those stacks of each of those statistics, and you can gain up to 5 of those stacks. That means you're gaining up to 25% of the total stats from just this armor piece alone. 12.5% accuracy and 12.5% combat advantage. Now you ask, is that actually better than the Ribcage? Well, if you do some math, you can see it's not in fact much better than the Ribcage at all. You can see that where with the old Ribcage, you'd be able to have that capped crit strike and capped crit severity, whereas with the new Ribcage, you could have that capped combat advantage and that higher accuracy. And this not taking into consideration that you would then adjust things to gain those stats back. You can see that it's a minute difference, a 0.038% difference in damage, meaning that the only real difference between this sharp jacket of the Dragon Hunter and the Ribcage from Avernus is just based on the item level difference between them. Therefore, it's not such a big deal in terms of maximizing your damage. You just gain a little bit more item level through this new piece. Ideally, of course, you would get it then, since it will give you that like 1% more damage, but still it's going to require you to completely rejig your stats on your character, replace different companions, so on, and you might just be frustrated in doing so and having to spend quite a lot of resources to adjust those and spend astral diamonds on other areas of your character to gain that crit chance and the crit severity that you would lose from the old Ribcage. So in my opinion, they're pretty much the same in the benefits and the bonuses to damage they give. Very nice to see a second option being put out there. Another armor piece here, very much like what we've had before. Whenever you hit your target for more than 50% of max HP, you will pull the target towards you. However, if they're immune to control, they'll suffer 20 magnitude bleed over the duration, which is 5 seconds, as you normally would pull them. Not usable in PvP. So this is exactly like what we've seen before from in Descent into Avernus. Here we had this clingy leather coat. Now next up, we have just an arms piece there, and basically it has charged rejuvenation. Whenever you're healed in combat, you will gain 10% chance to gain 7.5% recharge speed, a 30-second cooldown. Unfortunately, I don't believe this is going to be very viable. Recharge speed is good and all, but you're better off with just a good statistics. It might be useful if there isn't that many other good arm pieces out there. We shall have to see. Depending on what combat environment you're in, you might get healed a lot or you just might not. Next up, we have the Mighty Vambraces of the Dragon Hunter, and it will give you an old switcheroo of increasing your incoming healing but reducing your accuracy. Pretty big boost for tanks right there, just to increase the healing that healers can heal you for. However, you will take a hit to your accuracy, so you'll have to watch out on your aggro there. Next up, we have the Sharp Long Boots of the Dragon Hunter, where you'll increase your damage dealt by 5%, but decrease your critical avoidance by 25%. Now, depending tit for tat whether this is worth it for you. If you're in, let's say, a trial, there's a new one coming, you might not want to get hit critically for something big, and reducing your critical avoidance means those critical hits will hit you for even more. So we'll have to see whether this is worth running with. Next up, we have some more boots, and this will give you the benefit of Champion's Might. Whenever your health is greater than 85%, your power rating is increased by 7,500. We've seen this before, again from those hunts in Avernus. Next up, we have a legendary shirt and pants, and we can see the shirt there just gives you the benefit of whenever you critically strike, a chance to reduce your encounter power cooldowns. The effect limited to once per 5 seconds, so nothing special there, it just has high item level. Then for the pants, we can see you will also gain the benefit, as we've seen before, whenever you critically strike, you have a chance to gain action points, again once per 5 seconds. 1,600 item level, so the highest we've seen yet. Then we have these legendary rings, and we can see this ring is like an outgoing healing ring. It's going to increase your outgoing healing by 5% whenever you're moving. So again, depending on what trials to come, what content you're running, you might not be moving a whole lot, and thus this might not be useful. The next ring is, again, you're going to have to be moving, and you will gain combat advantage and power of 2.5% to each. But again, you'll have to keep moving. Then we have the Mythic rings, and here we can see it's just giving a bonus to encounter power damage, only 3%, so it's no way going to be a replacement for the Band of Air. You might want to replace it with a legendary ring that you're using from the Vault of Stars, let's say the one that gives you power and accuracy if you can cap those stats, or if you're just running with an encounter damage ring, then you could easily switch this out. The item level isn't significantly higher at 1,650. However, this might make up for it. You could run this ring, 5% damage against dragons. That could be very useful in the new trial, depending on what we're fighting. Then the next ring, whenever you use a daily power, your damage is just increased by 3% for 5 seconds. Not exactly the most useful, but at least you'll gain this benefit whenever you're in an artifact call. Next up, we have this ring, like we've seen before in Chult way back. Your powers will basically deal 2.5% more damage when you're 25% or closer to your target. It's very good for melee characters who are going to stay adjacent to the boss. Even ranged characters can take benefit of that as well. And very nicely, it should buff up all of your damage sources. Finally, the last ring gives you Charging Bull. Whenever you've been running for 3 seconds, you generate threat around you every second as long as you continue running. This is very good for those tanks. However, it's a little bit nerfed. It requires you to run for 3 seconds, whereas the other ring, which I should have right here, the Ring of the Condemned, whenever you run for just 1 second, you'll start generating that threat around you. So in my opinion, the Ring of Condemned is a little bit better for that instant threat generation as soon as you begin running, rather than this new Mythic ring requiring you to run for 3 seconds. So overall, they are requesting us to leave our feedback on all of this gear. In my opinion, most of it's good. There are a few pieces which are a bit questionable. These rings giving only like 3% to your damage are no way in competitive to, let's say, even the Power Ring or the Band of Air, which we have got from the Vault of Stars. But again, it will depend on how difficult it is to obtain this gear. As of right now, we cannot see any way at which we will get this gear. Either they might add a hunt system, they might add this into the new trial somewhere or another that you would drop this gear. Who knows? But this is just a preview of what is to come, and all of these bonuses can change depending on our feedback, whether we like it or not, and whether there's pieces of gear that are questionable and would never be used anyway outside of any builds. And if that be the case, then they're most likely to change the bonus to something we would desire more. So again, hopefully this has been somewhat insightful as what is to come. If you've been grinding for your ribcage, you might want to hold off on it. Depending on how difficult this new ribcage is to obtain, it might still be as much a challenge, and you might then be better off just continuing with your grind in Avernus to get the ribcage. It's not going to be completely outdated. This new armor piece is just going to give you the same amount of stats, but in accuracy and combat advantage, so around about the same damage increase. Personally, on my DPS, I like to have a bit more crit chance than I would have, let's say, accuracy, or even sacrifice a bit of combat advantage for that. It's nice to see your big hitting powers crit more often than not. So again, if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.